There is one thing no one tells you before you awaken. The truth does not always come with light. Sometimes it comes as a silent explosion inside you, as if an invisible fragment of the world has pierced through your safety shell, making everything familiar suddenly strange. You look around and realize that you have been living in a script that you did not write. And when that realization hits, it is not light, but silence that surrounds you. A silence so terrifying. Many people used to believe that a spiritual awakening is a glorious moment, that when you lift the veil of illusion and see the truth about yourself and the world, what follows is a feeling of relief, a deep joy, a light that never goes out. But for many people, especially those who are introverted, sensitive, or always looking for meaning in the small details of life, awakening is not like morning light. It's like a blackout in a room you thought you knew. Everything is there, but you don't recognize it anymore. You don't recognize yourself anymore. You've lived a routine. Maybe you've been chasing success, love, recognition, or other socially pre-programmed goals. You try, you get tired, and then one day you stop. Maybe it's because of an event, a spiritual experience, or simply an accumulation of long-standing fatigue. And then, suddenly, as if someone pulls back a curtain, you see it all. The false motivations, the roles you've played for too long, the beliefs that no longer fit. You thought you'd feel free, but what you see is emptiness. You no longer want to try, no longer want to prove, no longer want to compete. And this doesn't come from desperation. It comes from a strange feeling, a sacred weariness, as if your soul has gone through an unseen battle and now just wants to sit down, be quiet, and breathe. Not because you have given up, but because you no longer want to play a game that you have clearly seen is meaningless. At that point, you begin to wonder, why do I feel empty when I see the truth? I've come out of the fire, but why does the world feel cold? Why does the light of awareness not warm me? That question is the beginning of a deeper truth. You have not failed in your awakening. You are just standing on the threshold of a stage that few people talk about, the stage of dissolution. The dissolution does not happen with a sound. It is not like the shocks of real life. It does not involve loud tears or painful drama. It is the most silent and terrifying kind of silence. Like when you stand in the middle of a crowded city, but feel like you've left it long ago. Like when you laugh during a conversation, but know that the person speaking is no longer you. Like when you look at yourself in the mirror and don't know who to call that person anymore. This is not depression, although it may feel close. This is the beginning of an inner deconstruction process. You are not broken. You are entering a state of suspension, where the soul begins to clear out the things that are no longer true to you. And that process, while not dramatic, not loud, can be painful in its own way. If you are there, in the void, in the silence, in the air that no one speaks of, you are not alone. Many people have walked through that nameless space, but they rarely talk about it, because society has no language for it. We are taught to seek the light, but no one teaches us to stand still in the darkness. We are encouraged to succeed, to move forward, to create value, but no one teaches us how to rest in a sacred way when the old motivation is gone. In that moment, stillness is not failure. It is a sign that you are no longer being pulled by the old pull. You are no longer running, because there is no longer a path worth running. And that, though confusing, is the beginning of true freedom. Freedom does not come from having all the answers. It comes when you are no longer compelled to seek answers to questions you do not believe in. It comes when you can sit in the unknown, in the ambiguity, in the white space, and still not leave yourself. This is the moment of letting go. Not letting go of life, but letting go of the masks, the roles, the reasons for being that you have borrowed from others. When everything falls apart, what remains is you, not as an image, but as a vague feeling so real that it cannot be ignored. Let yourself be in that silence. Let the emptiness speak the voice you have never heard, because it is in that barren land that the seed of the real begins to sprout. You may not see it yet. You may not know what it will grow into, But one thing is certain. You are in the right place. The right place where rebirth needs to begin. And when you have been there long enough, when you are no longer afraid of the silence, when you begin to listen to the very small sounds within you, you will hear it. A beat, a call, not loud, not in a hurry, but clear. That is your first step, not back to the old world, but on a new journey. Not a journey to prove, but to be. Not to be seen, but to truly live. In the next section, we will go deeper into that void. Not to fill it, but to understand it. Not to rush out of it, but to realize it's not a loss. It's a space where real life is waiting for you on the other side. When you step out of the false light of your ego, the first thing you lose is not your reputation or your relationships, but your sense of direction. What used to motivate you, achievements, compliments, recognition, suddenly becomes meaningless. The old goal dissolves like a wall that has just collapsed, leaving a nameless void. You no longer know where you are going, nor are you sure if you want to continue. At this stage, you no longer feel excited about the things that used to keep you awake. You look at your goal boards, your deadlines, your New Year's resolutions and wonder, who wrote all this? Once, phrases like, must be successful by 30, or become a CEO to prove myself, were the driving force in life. Now, they are like lines in a play that you no longer play. It's not that you lack willpower. You just don't believe in the stage anymore. Carl Jung once wrote that when the ego is no longer in control, a new kind of energy begins to emerge, not from the outside, but from within. The old drive collapses not because you are weak, but because the old motivational system is no longer working. You used to run because of the fear of not being recognized. Now that fear no longer binds you, and therefore you no longer have a reason to run, this is not a regression. It is a transformation, an energetic detox. Just like when you stop drinking coffee after many years, your body feels tired and sluggish. Not because you are weak, but because you are readjusting your system. After awakening, the same thing happens to the mind. It no longer runs on the old fuel, comparison, competition, the desire for recognition, but the new fuel has not yet formed, and so you fall into a void. Society calls this void many negative names. Laziness, disorientation, lack of motivation. But for a person on the journey of awakening, it is a period of profound psychological restructuring. Jung called this nigredo, the first stage in the process of dissolving the ego. In ancient alchemy, this was the stage of dissolution. Matter is burned, separated, disintegrated in preparation for reunification at a higher level. In human psychology, nigredo is when old drives are dissolved and the ego loses control. Look directly at that feeling of emptiness. Don't rush to fill it with new projects, new challenges, or promises of self-renewal. Because if those things still originate from the old ego, you will only return to the cycle. Have the courage to stay in the dissolution. Let your mind fall freely without grasping at familiar anchors. That is the only way the new can truly emerge. You may find yourself no longer caring what others think. It's not because you're arrogant. It's because you no longer need external reflection to know you exist. You no longer have an interest in arguing right or wrong. You no longer want to be understood. You no longer need to prove anything. This is not apathy. It's a sign of a mind that is escaping the cycle of self-affirmation. In modern culture, we are programmed early on that life is about achieving something. Every day is a step toward success, toward status, toward recognition. But when you wake up, that picture falls apart. You begin to see it as a collective dreamer stage where everyone wears masks, speaks, scripts, acts out their own selves. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You can't continue to act. When the goal disappears, many people panic. They try to find inspiration again by learning a new skill, rewriting their 5-year plan, or diving headfirst into something just to feel less useless. But maybe what you need isn't a new goal, but a new way of being. a state where action isn't driven by anxiety or compulsion, but by an inner connection. An action that isn't about affirming values, but simply because it's the right thing to do. If you are wondering why you are no longer passionate, ask yourself, was what you used to call passion really a call from the heart? Or was it just a form of escape from insecurity? Have you ever tried to succeed not because you loved it, but because you were afraid of being left behind? Have you ever tried to gain recognition from your parents, respect from your friends, acceptance from society? And if all those reasons no longer affect you, then the silence you are experiencing now is not a collapse. It is a liberation. Imagine you are a tree. For many years, you have grown up because of the light outside, the light of praise, achievement, goals. But now, you have begun to draw nourishment from the very ground where you stand. You no longer need artificial light. You have begun to feed yourself with something deeper, quieter. It is a slow process, but it is lasting. It doesn't give you an instant high, but it brings a stability you've never known. The modern world doesn't know how to deal with inaction. It's afraid of stopping. Every moment is filled with noise, entertainment, work. But it's in stopping that the real things can emerge. It's not laziness, it's regeneration. It's not procrastination, it's reorientation. When the old impulse falls apart, don't pick up the pieces. Wait, because the new impulse, when it comes, will not need to be forced. It will be as natural as the heartbeat, as breathing. You'll know when it's time, and when it does, it won't feel like the old impulse. There's no tension, there's no pressure. It just feels right. Something you do not, because you have to, but because not doing it is not being yourself. It's soul energy. No reward, no stage, just total presence. In the next section, we will delve into the place where new motivation is born, where the ego is no longer in control, and the so-called real me begins to speak. Not through reasoning, but through intuition. Not through noise, but through quiet clarity. If you are willing, we will continue to step into the heart of the unnamed land, where the true self is waiting to be born. There is a stage after awakening when you not only lose motivation, but also lose the very image of yourself that you have built up. You no longer know who you are. The statements that once defined you, I am good, I am driven, I am strong, begin to fall off like old skin. The self that once controlled your every thought, decision, reaction begins to fade. But the important thing is, it does not disappear. It just loses its leadership. The self or ego is not the enemy. It is not evil. It is the psychological part of you that is necessary for you to survive and function in the world. When you are a child, you need an image of yourself to survive. A name, interests, personality, abilities. Society needs you to have a role, to have goals, to have predictable behavior. So you build the ego as a tool for interaction. But over time, that tool becomes a shell. And then in a moment, you realize you are living to protect an image, not to live authentically. When that truth breaks, the ego doesn't know what to do. It is not trained to exist without a script. It panics, or goes quiet, or tries to reconstruct a more elaborate version. But in the stage you are going through, the stage of disintegration, you begin to stop reacting the same way. You look at your behavior with distance. You see clearly how you used to try to please, how you used to get angry to be heard, how you used to chase after recognition. And now, those behaviors no longer convince you. Carl Jung describes this stage very accurately. The ego is not destroyed, but it is stripped of control. It is like a king who has just been dethroned, but no one has taken his place. This state creates a very strange feeling. You are no longer controlled by old fears, but you also do not have a new direction. You no longer believe in old roles, but you do not know who you will live as. You fall into the middle, a strange land where the old is no longer, and the new has not yet entered. This is the space that many people describe as not knowing who you are anymore. You wake up without a clear reason. You work without feeling connected. You communicate without feeling sincere. The things that used to be your guiding principles, self-worth, career, dedication, are now just empty words. But understand, this is not a deviation. It is a sign that the ego is no longer the center of your life. You are in transition, a transition from ego to soul. Soul is not a mystery, nor a vague concept. It is the deepest, most primal part of you, where emotion, intuition, and unspoken connection reside. If ego lives by recognition, soul lives by resonance. If ego drives you to do things to be seen, soul drives you to do things because it is right for you. In this stage, you will begin to feel very small urges. A desire to withdraw from the crowd, a need for silence, a subtle discomfort in the midst of chaos. These urges are not from avoidance, but are the way your soul begins to pull you back to center. No more wanting to perform, no more wanting to explain. You want to simply be. Even if no one understands, no one looks, no one applauds. Jung called this stage the beginning of individuation, the journey to becoming fully yourself. Not a copy of anyone, no longer a reflection of others, no longer a role to fit social expectations, but a state of harmonious coexistence between self and reality. Not to destroy the self, but to put it in its rightful place, a part of the psychological ecosystem, not the master of the soul. The hardest thing about this stage is that there is nothing concrete to hold on to. You will have no clear plan, no role model, no model of success to copy. And that leaves you feeling empty. You used to have a roadmap. Now, you are forced to learn to live according to an internal rhythm, living not to get somewhere, but to express something deep within you, right here, right now. The dissolution of the self is sometimes misunderstood as a crisis. But notice, you are no longer chasing attention, but you are not running away from yourself. You no longer want to multitask, but what you do comes from true feeling. You are no longer interested in the race, but you still want to be fully present in every moment. That is not laziness. That is a sign of a deeper awakening. If the ego is the loud one, always wanting to lead, the soul is the quiet one. It does not persuade, does not argue, does not force. It only whispers. But when you are quiet enough, you will hear it. A whisper that says, "Come back to yourself. Do this, even if no one sees. Live this way, even if no one understands." It is an urge that comes not from pressure, but from authenticity. When you begin to listen to that call, everything will change. Not immediately, not with fireworks or grand signs, but little by little, you will feel life return in the way you breathe, in the way you walk, in the way you filter what enters your mind. You no longer live to impress. You live to not betray yourself. And this is the key point of this shift. Living is no longer about achieving, but about expressing what is most authentic in you. You don't need to do too much. You don't need to try to excel. You just need to be present. And in that presence, you begin to return to the flow of life. Not as a protagonist struggling to act, but as a harmonious part of the whole that is being lived. In the next section, we will continue to explore. If the ego has dissolved and the soul has begun to speak, what does the new dynamic look like? How to act without falling back into the old compulsions. How to live from the center of the soul, where every choice no longer comes from fear, but from deep alignment. The answer will begin to appear, not as a theoretical proposition, but as a very real feeling. This is what I must do, because otherwise I will no longer be myself. When you have gone through the dissolution of the ego, the first thing you realize is that the silence is not the end. It is just the silence before a new rhythm begins. But this rhythm is not like what you are used to. It is not exciting, not pressing, not filled with applause or encouragement from the outside. It comes from a deeper place, slower, but more genuine. It is the soul's motivation. If the old motivation kept you busy, the new motivation keeps you present. If before you lived with the question, "What should I do to prove my worth?" you now live with a completely different question, "What is really calling me from within?" It is no longer a matter of strategizing, but of responding honestly to each rhythm that is happening. It is no longer a matter of planning, but of listening. The important thing to understand here is, the soul does not force. It does not push you forward with anxiety or fear. It does not speak with the uncertainty that you are late for your appointment with life. It just whispers. A whisper so soft that if you are not quiet enough, you will miss it. But if you stop, listen, and trust that wordless guidance, you will find yourself moving. Not to escape something, but to be fully alive, to something that wants to be expressed through you. The new fire is not like the fire of the ego. It does not flare up because it is challenged, threatened, or because it wants to win someone over. It burns because it is natural. It smolders, but does not go out. It does not need to be seen to exist. It is a call to action that comes not from lack, but from fullness. You do not do it because you lack. You do it because you are so full that you cannot help but share. The drive of the soul often begins as a very slight feeling, a faint flutter in the chest, a drive that is hard to name. Maybe it is the desire to pick up a brush and paint again. Maybe it is the urge to write lines that no one asked for. Maybe it is the intention to take a different path, even if no one agrees. It is not loud. It is not showy, but it has a clarity that the ego never has. Because when the ego acts, it needs a reason. It needs a strategy, a benefit, a confirmation. It asks, is this worth doing? What will others think? What do I get out of this? The soul is different. It does not ask. It just knows. It does not need reassurance. It does not need praise. It does not promise rewards. It just says, this is the right thing to do because otherwise I would not be me. Soul motivation is not the opposite of action. It does not make you passive or avoid life, but it changes the reason you do it. You still work, you still create, you still contribute, but now you do it with a different quality. No more tension in every stroke. No more fear of failure or desire to excel. You start doing it because you love it, because it is a natural extension of yourself. Soulful people do not need daily encouragement. They do not depend on inspiration from outside, because what they do is not an obligation, but an expression. You do not need anyone to remind you to breathe, because it is instinctive. With the soul, creativity, connection, dedication are the same. It is a form of breathing, natural, unobtrusive, unforced. And the strange thing is, when you start living from the soul, life also starts responding to you in a different way. What you do seems to carry a special magnetic field. Without loud promotion, you are still found. Without competition, you are still recognized. Not because you try harder than others, but because you are being true to yourself. And that has a strange attraction, not from technique, but from truth. However, this transition is not easy. There will be days when you doubt yourself. Because the soul's motivation is not the same as the old motivation, you will have the feeling, I am doing nothing. Society does not understand your silence. It calls it slowness, stagnation. But you are not stopping. You are reconnecting with the most sacred thing, your own reason for being. That is the greatest, deepest work a human being can do. You will need to learn to trust that silence. Trust that, even without anyone pushing you, without deadlines, without rewards, you are still on the right path. Because the path is no longer external. It is internal. And each step, even though it is not loud, is bringing you closer to who you really are. The new flame doesn't need to be kept alive by will. It needs to be kept alive by alignment. If you live in alignment with your inner vibration, the flame will not go out. But if you try to force yourself back into something that no longer serves you, a job, a relationship, a lifestyle based on pretense, you will find yourself fading. Not because you are weak, but because your soul is no longer aligned. This requires courage, because sometimes the new flame will take you out of your comfort zone. You will have to leave things that once felt stable, but no longer feel right. You will step into the unknown, the uncharted, the unnamed. But you will realize that the only thing you cannot do is go back and play the part. Soul motivation is a form of faith, not belief in the supernatural. It is faith that something inside you knows how to live. Believe that life is not a series of things to do, but an opportunity to express what is deepest within you. Believe that when you are authentic, everything else will find its place, not according to your plans, but according to the natural flow of truth. And eventually you will realize, it is not that you lack motivation. You are just waiting for a more honest source of energy. A fire that is not fueled by expectations, but fed by presence. In the next section, we will delve into your return to the world, but not as the person who used to play a role, who used to try to be something, but as the original, present, complete person, returning to life from the depths of yourself. A return not to win, but to connect, not to achieve, but to live, not to find yourself, but to be. One of the most common misconceptions about the awakening journey is that after you realize your truth, you must withdraw from the world. Many people believe that being true to your soul means leaving social life, work, relationships, and finding a kind of absolute silence. But the truth is, awakening is not about running away from the world, but about learning to re-enter life from a different depth. Not to assert yourself, but to live from your true self. After the period of silence, after the months of letting your soul fire be kindled, something begins to happen. Not clearly, not grandly, just a very slight feeling, like the first heartbeat of true life. You begin to be present again. Not because someone tells you what to do, not because of the pressure to succeed or the fear of being left behind, but because of an inner urge, a sense that you are ready to live, but not as before. You return to work, to relationships, to everyday activities, but you no longer do them from the same place. You no longer act to fulfill an image. You no longer interact to gain recognition or avoid judgment. Everything now begins from a deeper place, where every word, every action, every presence bears the mark of awareness. You don't have to say you've changed. Others can sense it. You may still do the same work, but the way you do it is different. You no longer need to prove yourself. You do it because it feels right to you. And if it doesn't feel right anymore, you know how to listen to the signals and adjust without justification. You may still be in the same relationship, but now you no longer accept the compromises that make you smaller. You begin to love through presence, not through role. This return is quiet. There is no declaration or ceremony. You simply re-enter life. But this time, you are not looking for a place. You are not looking for attention. You do not need to achieve anything to feel valuable, because you have found your foundation of value from within. And that changes everything. You begin to understand that living from the soul is not about living a separate life. It is about learning to be fully present in the most ordinary things. It is about washing the dishes with presence. It is about listening to someone without arguing. It is about doing things with joy. It is about walking without reaching a destination. Life is no longer a series of tasks to be completed. It becomes a flow, where each moment is valuable for its own sake. However, this stage also comes with very subtle challenges. You will find yourself still being pulled back by old reflexes. There will still be times when you want to go back to being good, attractive, and proper. There will still be moments when you doubt yourself. That is completely normal. Living from the soul is not a permanent ideal state. It is a practice, a constant return to your center. You will also realize that when you live from a deeper place, you no longer react so strongly to things that used to hurt you. Not because you are insensitive, but because you no longer rely on them to define you. Compliments do not make you drunk. Criticism does not break you. You no longer waver in the eyes of others because you have learned to look at yourself with a more honest eye. Another difference is that you begin to be selective. You are more selective about the conversations, the relationships, the spaces in which you appear. Not because you are arrogant, but because you value your life energy. You no longer want to waste it in places that no longer resonate. You no longer strain yourself to fit in. Authenticity becomes the new standard for all connections. And the strange thing is, when you live like this, you don't lose anyone. You only keep those who can truly see you. Coming back to life does not mean going back to the race. You can do great things, but you are no longer caught up in the need to score points. You can also choose to live slowly, live simply, live without needing to stand out. Whatever path you choose, the starting point is no longer ego, but harmony. What you do is no longer a means to be loved, but a way to express the life within you. This return is like a natural cycle. You cannot stay in the spiritual cave forever, nor can you completely return to the old stage. You have to learn to step out, but from a deeper place. No more wearing the same old clothes, no more trying to be someone else. You step out as you are. Not perfect, not sure, but real. At this point, you begin to understand what it means to live deeply. Not in a complicated or philosophical way, but in a connected way. Every action you take, no matter how small, carries awareness. You are not just doing, you are expressing. You are not just communicating, you are connecting. You are not just existing, you are living consciously. This is not the final stage, but it is a very important transition, from separation to integration, from seeking to presence, from external wandering to internal stability. And when you have entered this stage, you will no longer ask, "What should I do with my life?" Because every day of your life, every action you take, no matter how small, is already part of the answer. In the next section, we will delve into the specific manifestations of a life lived from the soul. How to distinguish between acting from acting. How to stay connected to your center in the midst of a busy life. And how to keep moving forward without losing your truth. Because the return is only complete when you keep your soul in every beat of your life. After you have returned to life from a deeper point, what begins to take shape is a new way of living. It is not clearly named in books, nor described by popular personal development systems, but you feel it in every moment. It is a form of living that is no longer rooted in the need to impress or be recognized. It is a way of living from the soul, where every action is an expression, not a performance. Performance is when you act with the goal of being seen, praised, approved. It is when you say the right thing to get approval, do the nice thing to get attention. Performance is always tied to someone watching you, either an outside audience or a socialized inner gaze. The urge to perform is always tied to lack of worth, lack of love, lack of acceptance. Expression, on the other hand, needs no one to watch. It happens because it cannot help but happen. It is fullness, not emptiness, that needs to be filled. When you live from the soul, you will begin to notice the difference between these two states in your daily life. You will speak less, but each word will come from the truth. You will work hard, but no longer out of fear of being left out. You will listen to others, not to respond intelligently, but because you truly care. Your presence becomes the most precious gift you bring to life. You begin to choose quality over quantity. Instead of trying to be everywhere, you choose a few spaces where you can be fully present. Instead of saying what people want to hear, you say what needs to be said. With kindness, but without compromise. Truth becomes a standard of living, not as a moral code, but as a natural rhythm. You lose interest in being authentic. You simply cannot live otherwise. People who live from the soul are not people who are without wounds, without fear, without mistakes. They are still human, with emotions, struggles, and sometimes doubts. But the difference is, they no longer let those things control them. They observe, accept, and from there choose to respond in accordance with their inner values. They are no longer reflexive, but begin to live intentionally. Not to control, but to be true to who they are. This sometimes makes you seem different in the eyes of others. You may be considered cold because you are no longer in a hurry to share. You may be considered distant because you no longer join in unreal conversations. You may be judged as eccentric because you are no longer interested in things considered normal. But you no longer feel the need to explain. Because you know that being authentic is not always easy to understand, but it is always true to yourself. One of the clearest manifestations of the soul is peace, even when no one supports you. You no longer depend on the looks of others to decide your actions. Your silence no longer comes from fear, but because you have learned to respect the space between voices. You choose not to respond immediately. You choose not to give your opinion until it is really needed. Not because you lack ideas, but because you no longer need to use words to assert your position. You also begin to relearn how to work, no longer doing because you have to do. You do because you feel alive in that action. A painter who lives from the soul does not paint to sell paintings. They paint because without painting they are no longer themselves. A writer who lives from the soul does not write to be read. They write because words are a natural flow from within. Every action becomes a form of breathing. There is no pressure, there is no calculation, there is only presence. And then, you begin to see people like you. Not through flashy conversations, but through their eyes, their silence, the way they walk through the world without beating drums and gongs. They do not need to name their path, but you feel the truth in every step they take. They live, not act. And when you meet them, you do not feel admiration, you feel returning. Living but not performing is not a state you achieve and then maintain. It is a continuous choice. In every conversation, every decision, every situation, you are invited to return to your center and ask, what is true for me right now? Not the rightest, wisest, most popular thing, but the most real thing. That answer may cause you to be silent when others expect a response. It may cause you to turn down an attractive invitation. It may cause you to stop being the person everyone likes, but it will allow you to be yourself. And when you live like that, you no longer feel exhausted by maintaining an image. You no longer feel stressed by having to control your words and actions. You begin to enter a more natural rhythm of life, where every action is an expression. You live to express your truth, not to win attention. In the next section, we will walk together to the end of this journey, where you are not only true to yourself, but also ready for deeper connection with others. How to share your authentic life without losing yourself. How to connect without losing your integrity. How to love not as a sacrifice, but as an expansion of the soul. Because being authentic doesn't mean being alone. It means being with people who can be authentic with you. After all the silences, the gaps, the silent transformations that take place inside, you begin to stand on a different platform. A place that is no longer filled with self-talk to be strong, no longer needing to prove yourself, no longer racing to become someone. You have learned to return to your center, but one thing remains deep inside: the desire to connect. Not to be understood, but to share something real, quiet, unpretentious, but truly moving. We are not meant to live apart. Even though the journey of awakening may seem lonely, even though there are stages where you have to walk alone to shed your old shells, in the end, the soul still longs to sing with something greater than itself. Isolation, if prolonged, will dry up. But the right connection, at the right level, has the ability to regenerate, nourish, and expand life from within. Once you have learned to be true to yourself, the next thing your soul craves is not an audience, but a companion. Someone with whom you can stand without defense. Someone you can speak your truth to without fear of judgment. A presence that allows you to breathe without playing a role. There are not many people in this world, but there are those people. They don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be present. And to meet them, the first thing you need to do is dare to step out of your own silence. This is an invitation. Let your journey no longer be a solitary story. Allow what you have learned, what you have experienced, to spread in the form of sharing. Not to preach, not to spread the truth, but simply to remind each other that we are not alone in this journey. Because every person who is walking silently with a deep question in their heart needs to know that there are still others, also quietly finding their way home. When you share, you don't just help others. You also clarify your own journey. Every time you recount an experience, you see more clearly what was once vague. Every time you speak honestly about your feelings, you deepen your connection with your soul. And every time you listen to someone tell you about their journey, you are reminded that truth comes in many forms, but at its core it is always the same. We are all finding our way home. We don't need a crowded community. We don't need crowded stages. We don't need a lot of voices. We just need a few real connections. A space where you don't have to edit yourself to fit in. A room in your soul where you are allowed to not know, allowed to pause, allowed to disintegrate and rebirth at your own pace. Connections like this don't come from impressing. They come from being genuine. Maybe you are reading this in silence, after a long day of self-reflection. Maybe you have walked through your own darkness without anyone noticing. Maybe you have been on the brink of despair, and just one small thing, a word, a look, an outstretched hand, kept you from giving up. If so, you know the value of genuine connection. And now, you can be the one to bring that to others. Let your journey be not just a personal liberation, but part of a healing network that is spreading silently through the world. No need to name. No need to label. Just be. Your presence, steeped in real experience, has the power to change the atmosphere of the place you pass through. An unforced calm, an unjudgmental gaze, an unhurried way of being. These are, in this day and age, more valuable than any lofty lesson. And if you have ever felt that no one understands the depth of what you carry within you, know now that it is not because you are wrong, but because you are at the threshold of a level of life that most have not yet reached. Don't retreat. Don't shrink back. Don't hide yourself for fear of being misunderstood. You, in your wholeness and imperfection, can be a light to someone who is wandering in the dark. Ultimately, this invitation is not a request. It is a silent echo of souls searching for each other. If there is something in this journey that resonates with you, if there is a phrase that makes you feel seen, allow yourself to move forward, not just for yourself, but for those who are still standing where you once stood. Sometimes just saying, "I understand, I have been through this," is enough to make someone feel less alone. None of us came here to live for ourselves. We were born to be links in a larger network. And only when you begin to live from your truth can you contribute to the weaving of the network that has been broken by roles, wounds, and misunderstandings. You don't have to do anything grand. You just have to be real. Every sincere choice, every unforced presence, every act of soul, all are part of the collective healing. The journey to becoming common is not about giving up yourself to fit in with the crowd. It is about stepping out of your comfort zone to meet other souls who are also living authentically. No one leads. No one goes first. Just companionship. A companionship that doesn't need many words, but always brings a sense of home. And if you are looking for a sign to start connecting, to step out, to share, this might be it. You have been on a difficult journey. You have risen from broken places. You have learned not to betray yourself. Now, let that be the gift you give. No reason, no plan, just show up. And who knows? You may become the whisper that another soul needs to hear.